What is up, guys? We are right now here in Jaisalmer attending this ride and learn sessions that are hosted by Triumph. With me is Mr. Vijay Parmar. I think he doesn't need any introduction. Founder of Raid de Himalayas, CEO of xplorearth. This is a 3-day session, 3-day training camp that has been conducted by Triumph. Over the last 3 days, we have been trying to understand how to ride in sand. Most of us buy adventure bikes and rarely have the courage to take these heavy motorcycles into the sand because of the various fears that we have in our mind. So in this video, we'll be asking Vijay sir certain set of questions. We have about 10 to 12 questions, and hopefully by the end of this video, you will have most of your doubts clarified. Thanks, Vijay sir, for joining in.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me here.
So I'll directly get into the questions. One of the questions that I have seen people having in mind is, can someone use a big adventure bike like a Triumph Tiger or any other middleweight or a higher cc motorcycle, which is an adventure motorcycle, to ride in sand?
Yeah, of course, you can use the bigger adventure bikes for, your adventures in sand. However, the lighter bikes are obviously a better option. But coming back to the adventure bikes, yes, not only have the adventure bikes crossed the Sahara fully loaded with luggage, but they've also been part of competition. And recently we've seen lady rider Vanessa Ruck do the Africa Eco Race and complete it on a Triumph Tiger 900. But yes, to answer your question, it is very much, unless you are racing with the smaller dirt bikes or the enduro bikes, being an adventure bike owner, you can easily take it into sand. Of course, after you have equipped it properly and you have learned how to ride sand.
So it can be done, not in the rally style sort of a riding.
No, it can be done even in the rally style sort of riding, but in that case, I don't think you can expect a very good finish. You can complete, but maybe that you would lose to the enduro bikes.
Next up, what sort of riding gear is required if you have to ride in sand? Is it different from the normal touring gear that we use?
See, the riding gear required in sand is obviously, unless you are doing a cold desert like Ladakh or even further up like the Taklamakan in the winter or something like that, you would be riding in extremely hot temperatures. That's why it's a desert. And generating those hot temperatures, the last thing you want to do is to be arriving there in your winter gear. Mesh, trousers, jackets, and I would not even recommend a jacket. An inner protective shirt with a motor jersey on top is good enough for riding in sand, and it has full airflow. You'll be cooled down quite sufficiently. Whereas if you wear the same jacket that you're wearing for your travels to North India, on-road travel, despite having all those air vents, etc., you will overheat, and once you overheat, your sand riding will go downhill very fast. I would recommend a pair of boots like these, which are steel toe and 4 buckle. And many boots also have a steel toe inside it. So it's not necessary that it is visible, but 4 buckle shoes are a lot better. Now these boots are like a mixture between motocross boots and enduro boots. They are not very comfortable to walk in, but then they were not designed for walking. So, but they will certainly keep you safe if you were to drop the bike on your leg, which you invariably will at some point or the other. Nobody can claim that he has gone into the sand and ridden there and never dropped the bike on his leg. So it's better to have the motocross boots, which are just till under the knee, cover your shin fully. And the second part of it, of course, is knee braces. Strongly recommend knee braces that prevent twisting of the leg and damaging of the ligaments. Once the boot is there to protect any fractures, the knee brace would protect any twisting of the femur, the knee, and also protect your ligaments. These two are very important. The third thing is, of course, that you have to carry a rehydration pack of at least 2 liters, 2.5 liters, and if you, as you will dehydrate very fast. So Liat and other companies also provide a device in which the bite valve is inside the helmet.
Okay.
So you don't have to take your hands off the bike to put the bite valve inside to, suck on the water. And it is hugely useful to prevent cramps, to prevent arm pump, and also generally to keep you hydrated and not overheating. Very essential. Apart from that, a helmet that has good ventilation and is of the highest quality possible. And I would recommend always that when you go out into the desert or any ride for that matter, we are wearing goggles over the helmet which has only a visor, because as we travel in groups into the desert, you get a lot of sand being blown in which goes into your helmet from underneath and then coats the inside of the visor with dust. So to prevent that, we wear helmets which are open and we wear them with goggles which fit our faces and no dust can go inside. These must have tinted lens for the bright light during the day and clear lens in case you run into the evening or the night. Apart from that, good ventilated gloves, not too heavy. Now the other thing is that whatever gear you are wearing should be thorn and abrasion resistant, because you are going to be hitting those bushes on the corners, and as you've seen in your training rides, that they hit back very hard. And fortunately the bushes in this area are not thorny. As we go down towards Bikaner, you'll find that the bushes have really hard thorns in them. So they can, if your clothing is not of the proper quality, they can rip up your shirt, etc., and you can get thorn injuries. So keeping all this in mind, this is the kind of gear that you really need.
That really helps. I think thanks for the detailed run around in terms of the gear, right? I'll come to the third question, which is I think the fundamental in terms of technique. What sort of riding position one must assume when they are riding in sand? Because normally when we are riding in gravel or hard packed roads, we see riders, putting their weight on the front wheel, elbows up and all that style. I believe that changes completely here.
Well, not completely. That is the essential core style of riding an off-road bike while standing up. Only difference really that happens is that when we are standing on the bike normally, we put the balls of our feet on the foot pegs, and yeah, I can show it to you. That will be better. So, yeah. The more that one can stand and ride in the desert, the better it is. So to do that, one has to adopt the easiest standing position, which will allow you to stand all day in the desert if necessary. Now, as far as our feet are concerned, the pegs, we stand on the pegs with the balls of our feet, not the instep. There are several reasons for that. One is, of course, we keep our feet away from the gear lever. When we are standing with the foot on the instep and the toes tucked in, our toes are also on the gear lever, which accidentally may shift down on a hard bump into a lower gear. When you're traveling fast, the last thing you want to do is shift down involuntarily into a lower gear. The other thing is that when I'm on the balls of my feet, I need all the suspension I can get. We have a few inches travel in the front fork, few inches travel in the back fork, but the main suspension is available to us in our body. So between the knees, we have almost 1.5 feet of suspension, but with the toes and ankles, we further get another 5 to 6 inches of suspension. So each time I get a bump or I'm riding where I want my legs straightened, I push down on my heels and I lean forward. This is required when you're climbing steep dunes, when the bike runs away from you and you are thrown back like that. At that time you may crank the throttle without really wanting to. So it's kind of whiskey throttle response might result. Now here what we have is that when we go into the hard bumps, one after the other, so your ankles are also allowing a bit of suspension, your knees are also. But climbing dunes, we want to lean forward easily, and that can only be facilitated by pushing our heels down. Proper riding position is more or less central as against weighted forward. So this is not a hard and fast rule, and it changes every second. So when I'm climbing a dune and I feel that the rear wheel is now spinning too free, that means it doesn't have enough traction because I pushed my weight forward. and I've de-weighted the rear wheel. So I'll automatically move back to allow some weight, some traction on the rear wheel. And then once I have gained the speed, I'll come back into the top position. Apart from any fixed position, it's constantly dynamic, and it changes between your standing tall to see furthest, to see what all obstacles are approaching, and then you go down when you require to enter a corner or you are entering a series of bumps and you don't want to be so high up. The absolute riding position is quite dynamic, changes all the time.
Thanks for the run through. So now, after the riding position, I'll just shoot some questions. Maybe we can answer, if you can answer them in a sort of a brief format, right? First of all, we hear that, riders who want to ride in sand, they talk about a lot of things, a lot of changes that they have to make to the motorcycle, right? One of them is lowering the tire pressure. That is heard a lot. I think we lowered the tire pressures during the 3 days that we were riding, right? What is the level to which we need to lower the tire pressure?
See, tire pressures normally are lowered. It depends on different makes of bikes. Bikes that have 19-inch front wheels cannot lower the tire pressures too much in front because the front becomes too heavy to steer. The normal tire pressure, which is recommended at 36 pounds in front and 41 pounds at the back, is to be lowered to 22 pounds front and back for off-road riding. However, we find that sometimes sand also changes conditions during the day. Tire pressures can go as low as 15 pounds to 12 pounds on the rear tire and 14 to 15 pounds on the front tire. If you are using tubes, you cannot drop it below 15 pounds. If you are using tubeless, you can drop it down to 10 pounds. If you are using tubes and you drop it below 15, you can probably break the nozzle on hard acceleration. So tube tires have a limitation, and then we have something called mousse, which is a tube which is solid, and it is designed at the factory, normally made by Michelin, which fits into the tire and has a preset tire pressure of 11 pounds. So mousse prevents punctures. There's no way you can puncture mousse because there's no air in that tire, and it's used by all the racing people all over the world, on the Dakar, everywhere. Gear lever is lifted slightly so that your riding boots, the toe can find a way underneath to help you change gears. And there are lots of minor changes that happen throughout to get a proper riding position. Windscreen is always kept at the lowest possible position because if you hit a bump, it will come up and hit your helmet from underneath. So rear view mirrors are actually not required and not encouraged, but instead of having two, you might as well have one. The levers on the bikes are recommended to be shorties, not the standard ones. So this, not only are they lighter, but they are shorter, and on dropping the bike, they cannot impact on the ground and brake. So I can show you the levers on a few bikes. You'll understand what the shorties are and how they will never break on a fall.
Doesn't the Barkbuster stem, doesn't it provide protection against the falls for the
Barkbuster stem provides protection against hand hits by trees, bushes, etc. Its job is not to provide protection against breaking the lever, because sometimes inside the Barkbuster, people adjust the lever slightly lower and then you can hit the lever despite a Barkbuster being there. And normal manufacturers call them brush guards, the plastic bits that they supply, which are completely useless. So Barkbuster is a very, very useful addition to the whole game.
One of the biggest fears that new riders have while riding on sand is washout of the front tire. The riding technique that you mentioned, that is obviously going to help avoid that washout situation.
Well, not really. It won't. The riding standing position will not help a washout on the sand. But yes, the centralized weighting of the bike will. So the wheel washes out, because sand is waiting to grab the wheel and pull it down. So the moment you turn the wheel, if you are not holding against it with positive pressure on the lower hand, the wheel will collapse and it will wash out. And sand does not provide a structure where it can get any grip. So washing out is a very easy thing in sand. However, what we do is that when we pick up speed, the grip or the time that sand has to grab that wheel and pull it down is very, very little. And as you are skipping along at high speed, this does not bother you, and even if it were to try and wash out, you would soon have enough momentum to recover it.
Okay.
And acceleration at that time when this is occurring is normally the way out for it. You would pull the bike out if you were to accelerate when you felt the front go. And correct weighting of the bike, it's more or less the rear wheel that goes.
Another topic that I wanted to take your advice on, and I think this is one of my biggest learnings over the last 3 days that I spent riding with you guys, was the focus on vision, right? Vision is something that all of us hear when we are riding off-road, on-road, you have to look far ahead. But actually implementing it was very tough for me. I think today I was focusing, with a lot of intent to look far ahead, maybe like 30, 40 meters ahead, right?
See, vision also depends on what speed you're at. If you're riding rocks and you're very slow, and the desert is not only sand, the desert is hard-packed trails, it's rocks, it's a whole lot of dirt, gravel, everything is there in the desert. Now, depending upon how fast you're going, your field of vision has to go further and further. Now, if I'm riding slow and if I'm at 25 kmph or 30 kmph crawling through a rock field, I'm not going to be looking 100 meters ahead. I'm going to be looking just 20 meters or 10 meters ahead to see which rock is coming next and what path I can find through. Finding the line is the critical thing for the vision part of it. So also seeing which way the road is turning, because the desert roads often, weave through the entire landscape, and you have to see whether the turn is coming up or not. So if you are traveling at a good speed and in the desert about 70 kilometers an hour, which seems almost impossible at the beginning to achieve, but eventually you can come up to it, then I would imagine I would be looking about 100, 150 meters ahead at least. But if I'm traveling at 30, 40 kilometers an hour, then 30, 40 meters, 50 meters is more than enough. So that is also dynamic. It will change depending upon the speed that you're at and how fast you want to go. Do you want to build up that speed, or are you constant at that speed?
When we brake in sand, obviously we know that most of the biting power of the motorcycle is on the front wheel with the 2 discs, right? Is there a special way that we have to apply brakes on sand? Because we get those, like we were riding, there were some sheep coming, some cattle coming here in between, right?
In those cases, see, when we apply the front brakes, the front end dives. When we apply the rear brakes, the rear end dives. So in sand, you don't want the front end to dive. You would prefer to have the rear end diving. You would apply the rear brakes for obstacles that are there. However, when you are traveling and you come across a corner, or most of the time, just de-throttling will cause the sand to pile up and your bike will settle down. And secondly, these big adventure bikes have got great compression, which can also be adjusted, by the way. How much engine compression do you want? Maybe not in the Triumph Tiger, but in other motorcycles that have the adventure bike branding on them, you can actually adjust the amount of engine braking that you would like. So the moment you de-throttle and the sand starts slowing you down, it's a very, very forgiving scenario, because sand will stop you. Basically, in the entire day, the application of brakes may be, in 100 kilometers of riding on sand, you would probably apply the brakes 10, 15 times. The rest of the time is
engine braking.
You just de-accelerate, and then almost immediately at the corner, you have to accelerate to hold the line through the corner. So it's all acceleration and de-acceleration at high speed. And at low speed, you don't need to use the brakes even. Very light tap on the brakes. The rear brake, I would recommend the rear brake more than the front brake.
Do you recommend switching off all sorts of electronics? Because I think we were riding in off-road pro, right? So any sort of electronics in the bikes, be it traction control, ABS, everything?
It depends what you're comfortable with. It depends what you're...
Because some bikes, I'm asking this question because some bikes have off-road ABS, right?
They have off-road ABS. The Triumph Tiger has off-road ABS, but when you go to the off-road Pro, it switches off the ABS, it switches off the traction control. And for people who have got used to ABS and ABS braking, and if you're not riding too close together and it's not a rally, I would recommend, yes, that you keep the ABS on to some extent on the front wheel, because preventing the washing of the front wheel is also the job of the ABS.
While we have done this ride for 3 days, right?
Yeah.
And now we'll be heading, at least I'll be heading back home, right? and probably I'll be coming to the desert maybe like after, maybe at the year end when the weather is favorable. How can one continue to practice or work on these drills? Because, for example, I live in Delhi NCR, right? I live in Noida, and I do not, I mean, for most of the people, they do not have access to a sand, the type of sand that we experienced here.
Yeah.
What is the best way to keep in touch?
Many places have rivulets and riverbeds, etc., which is the best second option for something like this. I mean, around Chandigarh, you have so many chos, as they are called, coming down from the Shivalik hills, which are what you would say seasonal riverbeds, but they are full of sand and they provide excellent riding. The sand is not the same as the desert sand. It is more coarse, it gives you more grip, and it is different, but it will keep you in touch with your normal riding techniques of sand, which are not easily available, like you said, in a place like Delhi. Where will you go and find sand?
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting that even when you're going, even around Jaipur, there are many dry riverbeds where you can practice out there. You don't need very much to practice. You just need a kilometer or two to practice.
So the last one, is around endurance when riding in sand. I think this is the first time that I spent more than maybe like an hour riding in sand, because normally when I do touring, sand comes here in between. My mindset is to just get through it somehow without falling, right?
That's right.
I'm not focusing on riding aggressively or changing all the stuff that we practice. I mean, there are...
I mean to say that sand is something that comes in and goes away, but
Right.
it's not the majority of it.
Exactly. Maybe a 1% or a 0.5% of the entire ride, right? So while spending all these 3 days, and especially at the end of the day 2, I was feeling totally fatigued. My shoulders were paining. My whole body was kind of shivering a little. I was feeling that I was about to get fever. I took a crocin, by the way, in the night and slept so that at least I wake up fine, right? Just as a precautionary measure. So definitely it takes a lot of toll on the body. But how can you improve your endurance to ride in sand? I know it's all together different.
Actually, the thing is that if you're riding motorcycles regularly, you are fairly fit. And it's not just a weekend ride, but if you're riding it regularly, you would be fairly fit. And lots of people suggest, working out. And of course, it's always good to lose weight, because extra weight is extra work. And but what we are missing out here is that it's not endurance that you need to build up, but efficiency.
Okay.
So when you are riding a bike and you have the correct riding position, which is not tiring your knees and your quadriceps, you are able to stand, you are able to breathe normally, you are not getting an accelerated heartbeat. All these things point towards your building efficiency, where you are able to look around left and right, see the scenery, watch out for threats of bushes that are there, animals that might be around. Most people are just stuck looking down that track, and that shows that they are concentrating too much, they're gripping the handlebars too tight, and they are not comfortable on the bike at the moment. Because only when you are comfortable on the bike will you ride with an easy stance, and you are able to look around completely. So when you are riding efficiently, you don't need to go to the gym just to survive that ride.
Okay.
You are really not putting in any work compared to the other guy who is just learning how to be efficient. So you are conserving your energy. You are not dehydrating so much, because you are not breathing that hard. Your heartbeat is not that fast. So the scene is to keep riding till you are able to relax while it's going on. And if you saw Abe riding, he is now very efficient in his riding, though he does appear to be out of breath, etc., but then he's going a lot faster and he's working a lot more.
Yeah.
But because he's in his 50s now, and he's so efficient, he appears to be making much lighter work of it than many younger riders.
Yeah.
So the idea is not to struggle. The idea is to learn how to let the bike do its own thing for a while, and you stay on as a guest on the back of the bike rather than the controller.
So I think it all boils down to practicing, right?
It all boils down to practicing, and also introspection after the ride of what you did wrong and how you can get better, and how the main thing is, which brought about this super accelerated learning in 3 days. If you tell anybody, I learned to ride the desert sand in 3 days, nobody will believe you.
Yeah.
But it's only possible when you ride with better riders.
Yeah, I agree.
Because when you ride with riders whom you are riding in your club or your group, you have all reached your plateau, and there is nobody who's going to push you further. The accelerated learning will only come when you ride with riders who are better, and you try, suddenly your eyes are opened that yes,
This can
it
be
is
done.
possible.
Yeah.
If one man can do it, another can do it.
Yeah.
So I would recommend always that when you're getting really comfortable in your riding, find someone who is riding far better than you and ride with him to improve your riding.
No, I think that is a great takeaway and a great ending message from your side. Thanks for taking out time, sir, and it was really a pleasure to ride these 3 days. I think this was one of the most exhausting and at the same time the most amount of learning I had about riding, specifically
Great.
in this tough terrain. So really
Glad
enjoyed
to
it.
hear that. You're most
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Yeah.